Welcome to my web development podcast, where I help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. In this podcast episode, I hosted a mock interview where it's more like senior level for software engineers that are going into like a algo coding heavy technical interview. And for the interviewer, I invited Sophie, who's the CEO of Formation, who has created a company. So she basically does this for a living, and she helps a lot of junior to mid-level engineers get into more senior roles at larger companies like Google, Lyft, kind of just like the harder technical interviews. And for the applicant, if you guys watched my previous mock interview, which is more for entry level, I brought Dan, my friend Don, who did the last one, to actually be the interviewee this time. So Dan is a senior level engineer, and we're giving him a senior level technical interview. So let me know what you think. Let's jump into it.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Sophie. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. Super excited to be chatting. So I see that you're currently an engineer at Coinbase, right?
Yep. So I've been at Coinbase as a front-end developer for about 8 months. Prior to that, I worked at an education startup in Chicago for over 5 years, where I kind of saw that project go from like 0 customers to this like actually like legit platform that's used by I don't know, a good chunk of high schools in the US.
Very cool. Okay, well, very excited to learn more about that. Just to give you kind of an overview, we'll want to learn a little bit more about kind of your career history and along with some of the stuff that you're doing currently at Coinbase, and we'll hopefully spend most of this time on a coding exercise after that. But yeah, I guess if that sounds okay, yeah. Can you briefly describe kind of the team that you're on at Coinbase and the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, for sure. So currently I'm on the growth team. So that really, it involves like making sure that people that sign up for the platform start interacting with the platform. So for instance, like, making sure that people make an account, buy crypto, set up recurring buys, really just engage with the platform. And I primarily work on the React Native app, but I bounce around to React Web as well. So yeah, fun fact, I actually had not used React Native before Coinbase, had to like learn it all on the job, and it's been super fun. I've just been having a ton of fun like learning a new technology.
Cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what your process was for getting ramped up on React Native?
Yeah, for sure. So thankfully, the promise of React to like learn once and write anywhere is actually true. So like it does feel very like comfortable going from React Web to React Native, because like you're still just writing React. Also, we have like a super robust design system at Coinbase. So a lot of the, it's like with React Native, you don't have access to like all the HTML elements, but like it doesn't matter because we have like just component design system components that we use for most things. And yeah, I mean, aside from that, there's a lot of like really awesome React Native developers that are there to help people out. We have like mentors who essentially just are there to onboard people with React Native. Because yeah, like unlike React Web, where there's like so many React Web developers, I feel like React Native is like definitely less, there's like less React Native devs around.
Have there been any like gotchas of like something that didn't translate quite exactly as you expected between React and React Native?
Yeah, so honestly, the scariest thing for me is the fact that there is like native code, and like as a web developer,
you ever had to hop down into native code?
Sometimes, especially when you have to like initially like set up the application, like some error happens that's like in one of the native modules, and you have to like go debug. I haven't actually had to like write native code, but I've had to like debug it just to like make sure that.
What's one of the bugs that you had to?
It's honestly just been more like understanding what was causing like my build to not build correctly. And yeah, usually it's just like, okay, like maybe it's like some dependency that I'm missing or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I would say that the other big thing is that like styling is just completely like, I feel like the web has come a long way with CSS and all the things that you can do. React Native CSS is extremely limited. So it can be much more difficult to like precisely like style things. But again, thankfully, we have a really robust component design system. So there's not a whole lot of styling going on.
Yeah, I think web styling is a lot more flexible because, with mobile, I feel like both the mobile platforms have more like established patterns for how apps look on each platform. So that makes sense. I guess going back to, so you were at Albert for a bit before. Looks like you were also at Glassdoor for some time. Is that right?
Yep. So I did a brief stint at Glassdoor between Albert and Coinbase.
And what motivated you to want to make a recent change? The recent change between Glassdoor and Coinbase.
I mean, so yeah, if I'm being honest, like it was a great, like love the people at Glassdoor, but I guess just the code base wasn't what I wanted to work within. I found it like
with the tech stack or?
No, I mean, it was still like a React tech stack, but the client server and like a lot of the foundational pieces just were not, they were very like, like in-house built. And I personally just didn't feel very productive. So I was like, I kind of made this decision of like, I haven't been here for that long. And I feel like if I stay any longer, I'm going to be here for like, 2+ years because I have like a track record for actually
all or nothing.
yeah, for like staying in places for a while. So I was like, yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like I could go, I could look for something where I can find myself being more productive. And thankfully I had a friend at Coinbase that was like, yeah, like it's super chill here. And like, yeah, like the code base is great. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of like awesome like developer productivity things that just make it easier for me as a individual contributor to actually contribute those features that we're trying to build.
Got it. Cool. Well, let's maybe transition over into kind of the coding portion of this call. So I think maybe you could go ahead and share screen.
Cool. I believe that should be up on the screen.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. So the problem that we're going to work on today, it involves strings. So what you're going to be provided as input is a dictionary of words, but it really just is an array of words, I guess. And what we want to do is fill in two functions. So one function is going to be called setup, and it will take this input dictionary of words. And a second function called is in dict, and it will take a word. And this will basically return true if it was originally in the input dictionary, and it will return false otherwise. And the goal is to do as much work as possible in the setup function to optimize our isInDict function. Okay,
so I think I understand isInDict. Because essentially that's, given a word, it's going to return true or false, whether or not that's going to be in one of the original input words. So could you explain setup a little more? Like, why do I need setup?
So it's going to basically give you the list of words. So let's say we call setup and then we call isInDict afterwards. If we did this, this would return true. And if we did this, it would return false.
Cool. So
you can either store some stuff in like a global variable. You can create a class if you prefer, but essentially the setup function consumes the dictionary and remembers it in some format, and your isn't_dict should reference that.
Cool. I mean, I want to. I feel like I want to set this up as a class because it feels better to like encapsulate like a dictionary in a thing rather than have like this global variable. So let's do this. And I guess, would it make sense to like, should I be able to call setup later and like reinitialize the dictionary, or is something like that like not necessary? And the reason I ask, I guess, is because if we set it up as a class, then we could just pass, instead of having a setup, we could just pass the input to the class constructor and initialize the dictionary that way. That sounds fine. Okay, let's do that then. So we're gonna have a class that's called, let's call it dictionary. Wow, CoderPad not giving me automatic brackets.
I think we might be able to.
It's all good. I can.
Wait, actually, it already has. You're gonna have to just type in your own brackets.
Let's see. Auto close. There we go. Cool. All right. So dictionary is gonna have a constructor. And then it's going to have is and dict. That's going to be a word. And essentially, so something that I kind of like to do is just like write how I would use a thing. So we want to say cat, car, and bar. Let's just say like test is new dictionary with the words, and this is going to be an array, right? So cat, car, and bar. And then we want to test, well, why don't we like console log test is in dict cat, which should be true. And then how about Don, which should be false. So, I mean, I just want to reach for a set, I guess, here. So that's not the right syntax. There we go. So words. Let's just say this dict equals new set. That's a words array, I guess. And I want to say that we have to spread it. Not totally sure about that, but I think that is how we do it. And then we can say return this dict includes word. Yeah, right now there's like maybe like 3 things that I would want to look up on MDN, but let's run it and see what happens. Includes. Is it has?
I never remember.
False, false. So it doesn't have Don. So let's say console log. Cool.
Oh my God, that's what it did.
Yeah, I think this has to be.
Yeah.
Cool. So we can remove the console log, and then, yeah, so cat is in the dictionary, Don is not. I will say that I do feel like using a set is kind of like cheating, since it includes like, isn't dict is essentially has, and the dictionary is essentially a set.
Yeah, cool. So I'm gonna kind of change up the problem a little bit. So now let's say that we're given this original dictionary as is, but now when we're calling isIndict, we might have a wildcard character. So as an example, you might have, and this isn't regex, so it's just the star just maps to one of an existing character. So this would return true. And I guess this would return false.
Cool. So the star can be any of one character at that place in the string, right?
Yep.
Cool. So, so I kind of want to reach for some being like array.sum, and like now I'm like, cool, why did I use a set? Because I don't know what methods a set has.
You can totally okay to look up syntax for anything that you need.
Cool. I mean, let's just let's do this. This, I guess, can become includes. Cool, so that still works. So now what I actually want to do is return this dict sum. So what we want to know is, does some dictionary word match the incoming word with wildcards?
Mm-hmm.
You are right that I could use a regex for this. We could create a dynamic regex where, like, let's just for fun, I think we could say, so const template equals word. We're going to replace that star with a dot, which is like the any keyword. And then we can say const regex equals new regex template, and then return test. So we want the regex start with that and end with that. Not how that works. There we go. Will this work? So cat should still be true, Don should still be false. Let's test that. True, false. Wow. I wasn't confident, not gonna lie. So let's say star AT. So it should be true, true, false. True, true, false. Amazing. Let's do star A star. True, true. That one should have O because it needs to be global. So we're going to do wow, can we use replace all? I didn't know that was a thing. Oh my gosh, that works. Okay, cool. But kind of like this said, it's like, oh, like the question is clearly asking if we can do this without a regex. So I mean, do you want to try to do this without using like a dynamic regex? I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. So let's try something without regex in a bit. But can you kind of I guess break down what the kind of runtime and space complexity of both the constructor, I guess in your case, and the isIndict function?
Yeah, so sum is going to be, I mean, the constructor just, sets it to be an array. That would be O1.
Sure.
But then sum would be ON, since we have to iterate through every word in the words array. And then where I kind of where I guess just the answer is I don't know is I actually have no idea what the time complexity for regular expressions is. So I know that the sum is ON, but then the fact that we're doing a regex inside, I'm sure tweaks that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never looked into regex.
Actually, not sure either, but I'm sure it's related. It's still at the minimum bounded by length of the words, I'm sure. Okay, cool. So I guess thinking back to the original prompt, we actually still want to kind of try to do as much work as possible in the constructor to try to optimize isIndict as much as possible. So if we can try to shift some of this work into the constructor, store it in however format we want to optimize for the isIndict function.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I can just convert. So let's see. We could do this. We could convert the array into an object where keys and values are the same. And then in isIndict. So let's pretend we did that, and we can do that real quick in just a second. But then we can say if this dict word does not equal undefined, then we can just return true, and that would actually, and that would be O1 in the best case. And then if it doesn't exist, then we can iterate and see, do any of our keys match, and at that point this would be an object values. So in order to do that, we would say const let's.
So you're going to still keep the regex?
We can revisit that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I can think of another way of doing that, although it might not be amazing in terms of time complexity, but it would, I guess, we can talk about the solution and whether or not you want me to implement that in just a second. But we can say word map equals words array. Well, let's reduce that array into an object where we have the accumulator and the word. Then we can say accumulator word equals word, return accumulator. Now, instead of a word array, we essentially turn this cat, car, bar array into an object of key is cat, value is cat, key is car, value is bar, or car, and then key is bar, value is bar.
And what did making that conversion do for us from a runtime perspective?
So, I mean, we do have to iterate through the array once, but essentially we are only now iterating in the constructor rather than iterating in isIndict, which we would potentially be calling multiple times.
So
the value of that is that now if the word does not have wildcards, we can look, and it is in the dictionary, we can automatically.
I got it.
Yeah. And we could even go a step beyond that and say if word, if the word does not include a wildcard, return false. And then we would only have to do the more the heavier operation if we do have to match based on wildcards.
So what's the kind of big O complexity of isIndict now?
So well, it is I'd say it's almost like an overloaded function at this point. So like it kind of depends. So like the complexity kind of depends on the argument, where yeah, like best case it's 01. And then to check if it, if it has a wild card, that would be ON. And then if it does have a wild card, then it would be whatever the ON plus or times the regex solution like equals.
Right. So I guess, yeah, is there any way that we can optimize this even for the case of a word being passed in as a wildcard that contains a wildcard?
Let me think. Yeah, so I guess the first thing that comes to mind is to like, I don't know why, like just like a tree like came to mind. If we represented the words as trees, could we do this in O(n) time?
Can you describe what you mean by tree?
Yes. Let me think about this for just 1 second. So
one thing that I can to help also is if it would help if there's only one wildcard character per word. Up to 1, I guess.
Gotcha. So I'm trying to think, let's see. I know that we can get this to ON, but I'm not sure if we can, is ON the best case scenario here?
When you say N, do you mean N as in the number of words in the array?
No, sorry, the number of letters in the incoming word.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we...
Because right now our O of N is actually referring to the number of words. So maybe we should use different letters to denote this, but
right, yeah.
K as in the length of the word, and then there's O of N, where N is the number of words in the dictionary. So reducing from N to K is a significant reduction.
Gotcha. So yeah, like how can we represent the setup words so that we can then actually only iterate through the individual letters in the incoming word?
Yeah, and I'll say there's a number of ways to do it. Yeah, there's you may or may not need to iterate through the letters in the word. There's definitely ways to do it that way, but I would say you don't have to limit yourself to that.
I mean, I almost, yeah, like I feel like I nothing is coming to mind. If you, yeah, like.
Yes. So I guess thinking about, so let's imagine that the word only has like a single star character. Right now we have a pretty complex, or like we're using regex to match it. But if we're given just a single star character, what are all the possible words in the original dictionary? How many possible like words are there in the original dictionary? that it could possibly match.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so let's say we're given isIndict and we're given *AT, right? Like how many possibilities are there, like for words in the original dictionary that could possibly match this? There's one now, but we don't know what words there are, right? So like if you were to check words in the dictionary, like for example, this word couldn't be bar, right? Like because the star character is here, not here, right? So there's only a limited number of words that it could possibly be.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what you're getting at. This is not like a thing I've, I guess, not a problem I thought of before.
Yeah, no worries. So like this, for example, if this was a word like this, if this word existed in the dictionary, it would be a valid match.
Gotcha. So you mean like literally how many possible? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Then I guess 26.
Okay. So if you kind of had to check that, what would be the runtime kind of involved in doing that check manually?
So in checking, if I had to check *AT, how many possible, is it 26, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess what would be if you manually checked all 26 of those letters? Yeah, what would be the runtime involved?
I mean, I feel like this is a trick question, but it would be like 26, which we can almost like just say it's constant time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And it's still bounded by the length of the word k, but yeah, essentially, because it's a fixed number of checks. But I guess to kind of push us further here, is there any way that
I think I see what you're getting at. So, I think I'm not positive.
Okay.
But would that mean that we can it's not quite brute force, but just iterate through every potential word that, for instance, *AT could be, and check that against our dictionary?
Yeah, that's like one potential solution. And I wanted to ask actually to actually push on this further. Is there a way that we can actually further optimize this such that we don't even need to loop through that? Like, is there a way that we can get something stored in our dictionary such that all we have to do is a very simple lookup?
Something stored in our dictionary.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about like cat, for example, thinking in the reverse, like what are all the possible inputs that we could get in isIndict that would be a valid match for the word cat?
Like *AT, C*T, and CA*.
Mm-hmm. And can you use that in some way to try to shift as much work as possible into the constructor?
Yes. Yeah, it feels, I could be wrong, because again, this is not a solution that I've necessarily thought about before, but it feels like a lot of work in the constructor, because we're essentially creating a dictionary of every possible permutation for the wildcards.
Mm-hmm.
But let's do it, whatever.
Okay. So if we store store it that way, what's kind of the runtime space complexity of each constructor in isIndict now?
So it would be the length of the words array and like now it almost depends on the words array and the individual words in that array.
Yeah.
So yeah, like as you mentioned earlier, it'd be like like n times like k. But it does give us then O1 for is and dict. So cool. I mean, I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so it's sweet. So now we have our word. Essentially, our word map is going to not only store the word, but then also, let's say word split for each letter and I. So let's think. I guess we don't, yeah, so we need a partial word is word. Partial word at I is a star. And then ac. And for what it's worth, this doesn't need to be the word, it can just be true. So now we can just say ac partial word equals true. Cool. And then oops. This will no longer work. Let's just verify that. True, true, false. Cannot assign to. To read only property 0 of string. Okay. Weird. I thought you could do that. Let's see. Oh yeah, no, that's not going to work. Wow, cool. Now I'm going to get tripped up on like literally modifying one word or one character in a word. Do you mind if I just like look up string on DN?
No, totally fine.
Is there like a replace character at? Can we slice? Cool. So we want essentially to say like, I'm actually going to do this in console here. So we're going to say var word equals hello. Start and we actually want end to be I plus 1. Can you still see my screen?
I can, but you might have made the window smaller to look up resources.
Oh, gotcha. Here, let's see if I can do that again.
Oh, looks better.
Cool. Is that working?
Yeah, looks good.
So let's see. So I'm trying to figure out, let's see, I plus 1, and let's just console log.
Nice.
Cool. So then we want const partial equals template string of start star and does this work? True, true, undefined, undefined. So we actually want this to be or there we go. Hey, sweet.
Nice. Got it to work. It's always the simple things again. Yeah, maybe we can try one where with like a valid wildcard input that actually should return false.
So
Sure. Okay.
cool.
Yeah, looks good. And we don't have to code this version up, but I guess as a final twist to this problem, how might you adapt this algorithm to work if there were any number of wildcards that could come up in the isIndict function?
Yes. So I think that, like building every permutation and storing that in our dictionary just might be like, it might be a lot. So if we had to support multiple wildcards, I'd probably go back not to like a regex necessarily, but just something that like iterates through the letters in the word. And I guess the idea that I was playing around before was like, could we make like some sort of object like this? And like, honestly, like, I don't know if this would work or how I would go about like actually implementing it, but essentially like building like a character map of like the words and like, so I think the example like explains it better. But so for instance, maybe it's like true or something, or just, yeah, like some, to actually have it be an object that is valid. But for instance, like cat and car could be combined into this object of like C-A-T, C is the first letter, A is second, T is the third.
What happens when you get a wildcard? How do you look it up?
Then you would have to just like, I guess, skip it and potentially look up the next character. Like find the ones that have the next character in there. I feel like that might be, I don't know if that would give us like an actual advantage in terms of time complexity.
if there's a lot of wildcards, you'll have to do like a lot of splits of potentially up to 26.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, yeah, like, is there eventually like a set of requirements where just like iterating through, you know, the words in the dictionary, like character by character, like eventually becomes more beneficial?
Yeah. So the one thing that you can, to build on top of what you were building with the object, you could actually have an explicit star character, which essentially is like very similar to what we did here in storing in a dictionary or a set. But instead of having just like cat, you could also build up all the like versions where each letter also has a star so that you can actually just step through. Yeah, that's like one thing that you can do. But then also like building up the dictionary of all possibilities is obviously not probably something we would do in practice, but for the purposes of this exercise could also work because it's still O of 1 lookup.
Right.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I guess that was the problem. Yeah. What'd you think of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's super interesting. I don't know if I would have come to the conclusion of initializing the dictionary with the wildcard on my own. I feel like, yeah, like the trade-off there of building this potentially like very large object up front versus and getting that O1 lookup time in the isn't_dict function, and you know, just having the isn't_dict function have to do a little bit more iteration. Yeah, for me, it's like I don't actually know.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah,
you're trying to optimize both.
Right. But yeah, no, like once I mean, it obviously took me a second to understand like the solution that you were proposing. But yeah, like once I got it, I was like, oh yeah, of course we could do that. So that's, yeah, I'll definitely like keep that in mind whenever I'm doing like string manipulation stuff in the future. Because yeah, fun fact, at Albert, I worked on a text editor like quite a lot. So and that was very like regex based. So I always just like,
you were really fast at implementing regex. I was like, usually like people don't try to do that because they assume the syntax is going to trip them up too much. But you just like busted it out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, worked on a text editor for a very long time. But I mean, so that solution too, you know, I would have eventually, like, if I didn't know regex, I would have just iterated through each character and been like, you know, does any word have you know, like does it start with a C at this index, or but like the time complexity there would be like absolutely garbage. Yeah, because we'd essentially be like iterating through every word in the setup array.
Yes, yeah.
How did it go?
I think it went pretty well. I have lots of comments though. Should I like
Yeah.
Should I just go through them? Yeah, I was typing up some things I wanted to say afterwards, but yeah, to me, it was very clear that, you know, Dan was very fluent and comfortable in JavaScript, which is just a really good sign. Like, he used pretty, like, JavaScripty ways of structuring his code, which, you know, like, I feel like when I interview some really junior people, it's like, I feel like you know, I see like standard for loops and like just more verbose code. And so the code was really fast and fluent. And to me, that was probably the thing that would make me lean towards yes, because like clearly this person knows how to write code in production. So I think a few kind of comments, and you want me to do this here and not like later?
Yeah, I'll show them the comment, and you guys can talk afterwards.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think to start from the very beginning, there's in the behavioral section, I think I actually probably would have gone typically pushed more in a real interview, but I did want to focus as much as possible on the coding portion. I think that I think one of the points I wanted to make is anytime like there's like really short periods of like employment, like you're always going to be asked about it. It's not a problem, but you're going to need to explain. And I felt like the explanation was slightly negative. And I always think that you should try to frame kind of what you wanted out of the next position rather than what you didn't want from the current position. Like you can always make the exact same statement more in the positive sense.
But I don't talking about Glassdoor?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, like instead of saying, oh, I didn't like this about Glassdoor, saying like, I was looking for a code base that did more X, instead of like, I wanted to get away from code base that did Y. So that's like, I think just a very easy shift to, you can always restate anything that's negative to the positive by doing that. But I don't think it was extreme, so totally fine, just a little note. I think during the coding portion, I felt like overall one of the weaker points of the interview was actually going into code quite quickly. So there wasn't a ton of like collaboration and questions ahead of like each segment where we coded. I felt like every time I presented something, it went to code pretty quickly, which meant that I wasn't able to kind of guide directionally, like because he just started coding right away. So a couple examples are, there's like some things where there like kind of edge cases weren't clarified. For example, like with string questions, like asking about case sensitivities, like one that's good, like do you consider like capital cat the same word, right? Things like that. And kind of aligning on approach before going to code. For example, with the regex thing, it's like, it might take a few minutes. The good thing is he did it really, really fast. So I actually don't think it hurt him at all. And in fact, it was impressive. I was like, wow, you actually got it done. Because normally I might have advised like, oh, we don't need to go down that route. But then how quickly he did it was actually ended up being impressive. So I think maybe more aligning, more questions could have been helpful. And in general, like this particular question, one of the reasons I like it is actually there's just like a lot of different optimizations that you can make, and there's a lot of analysis that we can have in conversation that's outside of code. So, and then I wanted to point out one particular kind of segment of the interview, which was I think an inevitable trough that every good interview I think has, which is when you're totally lost. And how you handle that, I think, is one of the most important, like behavioral, like pieces performance-wise that you can have. And I think Dan did pretty well there, but I think it was kind of like neutral, maybe. Well, like I think there was slight frustration, or like, okay, I haven't seen this type of problem before, and yeah, I think that I think just going into every interview kind of like with the expectation, like I'm going to be in a moment where I have no idea what to do, and just be ready to like kind of like have a positive attitude working through it rather than like, hey, I don't know. But again, I actually don't think it was extreme. Overall, I would have gone yes in this interview. These were just some minor flags, and then the impressiveness of just the execution speed and kind of cleanness of the code generally kind of clearly puts this in a yes bucket for me.
Okay. That was a lot of really good feedback. I know Dan personally is going to really appreciate that. So I definitely want to talk afterwards. Yeah, that's all awesome.
Well, I guess I'll maybe see this after.
So yeah, he'll see it for sure. So this is kind of like a mock position for a fake company, right? And it was a practice interview for more of a senior level position, correct?
I suppose, yeah. That was what I was thinking in my head, but yeah.
Okay, so I guess, from Dan's performance and how he did with the interview, what kind of and what level of positions do you feel like he would be qualified for in this company?
So I would say that coding interviews, it's really hard to place people into seniority buckets based on the coding interview. If I was doing that, or if I wanted to do that, I would definitely have to push a lot more on the behavioral portion of the interview. So there's certain types of interviews where like the expectation is more split. This was primarily an algo interview, which usually is like maybe 80 to 90% like just coding, very light questions. But I think there's some interviews where it's like, 20 to 30% maybe behavioral, and we get more in depth in a particular project. And I think more senior people that like will face that more. The other thing is systems design interviews are better at judging seniority, I think, than just the coding. But I would say that based on like the resume alone, but then also kind of like the fluency of the code and how like clean the code was, like gives me indications that this person seems to have worked in like a high quality code bases before and is really like solid. So yeah, I would say there's not a lot of signal on like seniority. But I would say that this passes the bar for like a seniorish level coding only interview. And I would rely on other interviews in the loop for other skills important to senior engineers.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, Sophie. I'm going to toss you out and bring him in. Stick around for a little bit if you can, and we'll bring you back in.
Will do.
All right. How's it going, Dan?
Heyo, can you hear me?
I can. Loud and clear.
Cool.
So how'd it go?
So I think that since here, I'll say this. When I can actually like accomplish a task in any way, shape, or form, be it like brute force or most optimal, I tend to feel pretty good. So so yeah, I mean, I feel like I did a fine job, especially given that, we were definitely trying to like do a task, and like I guess like the bar for like most optimal being like 01 for this type of problem just seems like, high, and one that I didn't like necessarily get to without help. But like the fact that like we were able to proceed through the interview and kind of like knock out some of those initial requirements, gave me like a pretty good, I feel good. I think it's funny because like once, like there was that moment where Sophie was kind of explaining or like almost like leading me to that most optimal solution. And it was like hard to, like she clearly like knew what she was talking about, and she, like she had this idea in mind for like a way to do this, and like what ultimately ends up being like 01, which is awesome. But for me, it was like, oh man, like what's she trying to say? Like it took me a second to get there, but yeah, like once we got there, then I was like, oh, cool. I understand what you're saying. And that's what's really funny about stuff like this. Cause like, it's like the concept is the hard part. Like writing the code is, I mean, yeah, at this point I've been doing this I've been writing JavaScript for long enough where it's like, I can translate the concept into code, but if I don't know the concept, well, I'm going to struggle. But yeah, no, I felt really good about it. Yeah. And I was just actually thinking of just like, oh, what other ways can we do this? And yeah, I feel like I thought of an interesting one. I might ask Sophie what she thinks later.
Okay, that sounds good. And yeah, I'm glad you did struggle a little bit. I knew she would be the person to challenge you. I knew she'd be perfect for it. And, a lot comes out in an interview, and just even like how you handle the situation, even just, working with her to be able to figure out the optimal solution that she's aiming for and how you go about it. It's really interesting to see that because a lot of people struggle with that concept. I think a lot of people are going to love to, watch you work through that. But what's one main thing that you can improve looking back at your interview?
So let me think. I mean, I think I kind of hinted at this towards the very end when Sophie asked how it went, but I have like, you tend to fall back to the tools that you're familiar with. So to be honest, I don't know if I would have come to the, dynamically building a dictionary with wildcards included. Because like that's just a concept that I haven't like thought of. So I think just like trying to broaden the scope of potential solutions for stuff like this would be helpful for me, because it's it's one of those things where like you don't know what you don't know. And now I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah. Like, this solution makes sense. I can probably like, I'm likely never going to have to solve this exact problem in the future, but one similar to it might come up. And, if performance is, super paramount, then yeah, maybe like doing a lot of upfront work so that you can get those that improved performance down the line might be like a good way to think about things. And I feel like this definitely like taught me that, because like even with the original question, like my mind was immediately like, why do I need a setup function? Like we can literally just take the array, do an includes or whatever, but like, yeah, like maybe ON isn't the best solution. Like maybe there's an actual like benefit in having this be like O1, but yeah, no, I think, yeah, that was like probably my biggest takeaway.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to share the feedback that she shared as well. Like I said, it was fun to watch. So I guess one more question for you going through this interview. What impression do you feel like this interviewer gave about the company that she's recruiting for?
So, I mean, if I was interviewing for a like front end position, I think that this might be like, not the most ideal, just because like this is not very like front end related and it's very like, it's super algo heavy. But that said, I think that this kind of question to me like suggests that they're looking for people who have like a very strong understanding of like fundamentals. And it's definitely, I mean, not gonna lie, it was a super interesting, challenging problem. So like I had fun with it. Also the general format I enjoyed. It was very like, collaborative, which, made me think that like the person that's actually interviewing me is also like, highly technical, which is always appreciated. Yeah, I think, yeah, if I had any feedback, it did seem like we were, I guess, like striving towards a specific solution, and it was maybe like more difficult to like, I didn't know that up front, and maybe would have rather like, been told that a little bit more explicitly. But I mean, overall, I think I had a really positive experience.
That's the end of the interview. If you liked it, please consider liking the video. It really helps boost the video in the algorithm. And I really appreciate Sophie and Dan for doing this. It's really hard to do something like this on camera in front of thousands of people. So, props to both of them. But, Sophie is the CEO of Formation. And, what they focus on is helping early software engineers prepare for kind of like mid to senior level roles and technical interviews, especially harder to get into companies like Google, Lyft, etc. So, if you feel like you need that extra prep, feel free to check out Formation. Maybe it's for you, maybe it isn't, but check them out. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and link their socials in the description below. At the very least, I'm probably going to link their LinkedIn so you can connect to them there, let them know what you think. But more importantly, we're probably all going to be checking out the comments. So please leave a comment. Let us know what you think of it. And if you want to see more mock interviews like this, let me know as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I will see you in the next podcast episode.